Not an objective source of information. They are a highly biased political machine that is bent on never letting somebody like Donald Trump come to power again.
The Google whistleblower has come out of the shadows, this time releasing a large cache of remarkable confidential Google documents that expose Google's political bias and a scary progressive social agenda. It was June 24th. Project Veritas released an investigation that included an interview in the shadows with Google insider Zach Vorhies. Within days, it seems, Google was on to him.
Out of the blue, I got a letter from Google indicating that they knew what I had done.
The internal Google documents from the story given to us by Mr. Vorhies reverberated through the halls of Congress.
In this Project Veritas video, which I did watch last night, they allege that there are internal Google documents, which they put on the video, and this is what it said. For example, imagine that a Google image query for CEOs shows predominantly men. Even if it were a factually accurate representation of the world, it would be algorithmic unfairness.
In some cases, it may be appropriate to take no action if the system accurately affects current reality, while in other cases, it may be desirable to consider how we might help society reach a more fair and equitable state via product intervention.
What does that mean, Mr. Slater?
What do they mean by that?
So what they want to do is they want to act as gatekeepers between the user and the content that they're trying to access.
Here is another one of the documents that you leaked to us.
This particular blacklist is showing which news sites aren't going to show up underneath the search bar when people are searching on their Android phones. For them to go under oath and say that these blacklists don't exist is hypocritical at the least, and it's perjury at the worst. And if I didn't do this, then I'd have to live with myself for the rest of my life. And people aren't going to understand what I'm talking about until they see the documents, because it's really that bad.
It's my pleasure to introduce you to Zach Vorhies. Zach, really, thanks for making the trip in here.
Thank you, Dale. Good to be on the show.
Yeah, you really exposed Google. You were one of the first people. You were referenced as the Google whistleblower. Take me back. You know, the truth is, I really don't know your story that well. How did it happen? Like, what was that moment where you decide, I gotta say something about this?
Yeah, it's a really crazy story. So I've been working at Google for 8.5 years. First 5.5 years, I was working on this project called Google Earth, put into the Audi navigation system, the best navigation system in the world. And then I left for 3 years, started my own company, and then came back working for Google, and they put me in their YouTube division. Now, I don't know if you know that YouTube is completely owned by Google. They bought it out, but okay. YouTube is owned by Google, and so I got to work in one of the coolest projects in YouTube, which was to put YouTube on the TV and the game consoles. And I started that in 2016, and 3 months after I started, Donald Trump won the election. Now, I considered myself pretty apolitical. I really thought that it was just like the lesser of two evils of, they're both bad. Yeah. I didn't even vote, just to be honest. And then when Trump won, I woke up and I kind of laughed to myself. I was like, well, this is going to make a bunch of heads explode, but I didn't really care that much. But it turned out that Google cared a lot about who won the election, and they were not expecting Donald Trump to win. And for some reason, they had a huge problem with Donald Trump winning the election. So much that they had this like all hands-on meeting where the C-level executives, the CEO, the CTO, were talking bad things about not only Donald Trump, but also about the people that voted for him. And one of the interesting things that I remember about that meeting was the CEO, who is Sundar Pichai, stating that one of the successful things that Google had done in the election was to use their machine learning intelligence in order to block out fake news. And I went, wait, we're blocking out fake news? What? I didn't know that. And so I started searching, and which is what I do. I like to dig. And I started digging in the documents of the company that were available to all full-time employees. And what I found shocked me. They had defined fake news, and they were intent on censoring it. Now, what exactly did Google think was fake news?
That's going to be my question.
Right?
What defined fake news for me?
And so they used examples of fake news that actually included real-world events. Let me give you a specific example. They cited that the concept of Clinton running weapons through Benghazi in order to fund ISIS and arm them was a conspiracy theory and fake news. And so I started digging in, and I was like, no, there's actually a lot here. There's actually some high-level, officers that are coming and saying that this is indeed what happened. So how can we make the determination of fake news? At the very least, it requires more investigation before we, put that...
Silence it.
Yeah, before we silence it. But Google was putting this as an example of fake news, and as a result, they were going to censor it. And so I'm like, well, if they're going to act as the judge, then how are they going to be the executioner? How are they going to execute the silencing of that fake news? And it turns out that they had a project for that. And that project was called Machine Learning Fairness.
Machine Learning Fairness.
Think of what is machine learning, first off? So think of this whole set of AI, right? You got AI that plays chess, and then some that plays checkers, and then you've got this whole subset of AI called machine learning. And what machine learning does is it tries to find patterns in piles of data so that when you give it new data, it's able to make classification. The example that a lot of people like to give is a machine learning algorithm that can detect cats or dogs. Well, they're using machine learning fairness to detect fake news and then re-rank it. What you have to do is you got to create a training data set. And the way that the training data set is that you've got, let's say, a list of articles, and then you've got an army of human raters that go over there and classify the media manually. And then you run that through a machine learning algorithm, and it trains this machine learning program to figure out what the patterns are. It starts to say, oh, well, if it has these keywords in it, then I'm going to label it fake news. And so that's what they were they were doing, is that they were training, and that they were laying down this plan of how to rank the whole
Now, is everybody
internet.
sitting in these meetings you're the only one that's going, this is ridiculous? Or
Here's the thing,
I feel like everybody was...
I wasn't part of the meetings. I was just a full-time engineer that had access to the regular documents that every other full-time engineer at Google had access to.
So if you're not in the meetings, what are these, just water cooler discussions? I mean, how did you find out this is going on? There must have been some people talking about what was going on.
They were posting design documents on the internal internet. So we've got this strange little internal internet in Google. You can type in links that don't work on the outside. So what I was able to type in was http://go/ml-fairness. And then it would bring me to a link that would then have this huge expose of all the different documents that were involved with this machine learning fairness. And it's big. And it's not just one system. It's got little tiny components. And so they disclosed this silently on the internal documents, and they were using this as a framework to kind of convince other managers, hey, this is what's coming down the pipeline. Hey, you're going to start having to prepare your products for this machine learning fairness rollout. And so they didn't really try to keep it a secret. They just didn't really announce the project. And specifically, this was in 2017 that I discovered that this program was being rolled out to the different product categories of Google.
So then you're looking at these things, you're bothered by the concept, you're agnostic when it comes to politics. Were you agnostic about news? Did you have opinions about did you have a thought that there was such a thing as fake news?
Yeah, I did, but I thought that that a lot of people were confused because they were disagreeing with the scientists and what are all the smart people in on it. And so I just thought that people had a tendency to be paranoid. So I didn't really think that fake news was on the side that I believed in. So Yeah, I mean, I guess that's the best way I can describe my political opinions. I just didn't really understand what was going on at the time because it's really confusing. Now, in this awakening that I have, I look back and I realize that it's actually intentionally confusing so that people don't understand what's going on. And once I figured that out, then all of a sudden, everything that I had learned in the past sort of like came together and made sense.
Right, so take me back. You make a decision. You're there. You're somewhat, it seems like not, you don't sound like you're a giant rebel that's in there to just shake things up. But at some point, you decide to take information outside of Google.
Yeah, so
Tell me how you come to that conclusion.
Well, actually, it was really easy because as I started to awaken, I started to realize that these people have no idea that what they're doing is like on par with like what the Nazi regime is. And I was able to like intercept it before they're able to totally roll it out. And so I said, this is so explosive that once it hits the general populace, they're going to wake up and realize what they're doing is really bad. They're going to take it down. And so I said, I've got access to this information right now. So I'm just going to archive it. Just archive it for my own personal use because it's so out there and so contradictory to what Google is doing that no one's going to believe me unless I've got the facts and the documents myself. So that's what I did. I just started downloading them, downloading without the intention of disclosing it to the public. I just wanted it to convince myself that I wasn't personally going crazy.
Now, at this moment, you're downloading. Look, you don't live in a different age. You live in the age of Edward Snowden. You know, we've watched these stories. Are you thinking to yourself, let me not do that? Or are you idolizing someone like that? Or is it just not entering your mind at all?
I mean, I liked Edward Snowden. I liked Julian Assange. I liked there's kind of a era of whistleblowers that are coming out. And I was like, yeah, like that's, so maybe I thought of myself as like a Julian Assange a little bit, downloading this stuff, even though I was like, it would be bad form to release this to the public.
But so you're taking the baby steps. I'm gonna take some baby steps. Let's see if I talk myself into this is what I'm guessing you're thinking, but I probably won't. But I can at least just really look at this and make sure I'm not losing my mind. Are you telling friends? Are you talking to other people?
I'm telling friends and they're telling me that I'm absolutely nuts. No, you got the wrong interpretation of what's happening.
That's got to drive you to want to share it even more. Like the more denial you get, does it say I've got to prove
because
this?
the thing is that I realized that if this got out of what I was doing, that I could get in some really big trouble because whistleblowers are not handled very nicely if they get caught before the information gets out. So I'd learned to kind of keep my cards close to my body.
What's the turning point? When does it decide we're going public?
I caught Google deleting words out of their Arabic translation dictionary in order to make a Trump tweet sound crazy. And I realized at that point that this was sedition. Do you know what the word was, Del?
No.
The word was kafefe. Okay? Trump comes back from Saudi Arabia after spending some time there negotiating. He comes back and he says, despite the negative constant press, kafefe. Well, it turns out that word translated to we will stand up. And some other translations say that it was a word that was an antediluvian word before the Great Flood, which meant that we would stand up to those that are fallen. And so this word, which was translating from translate.google.com, started to create this kerfuffle. And a bunch of people on the internet said, aha, we figured out what this word means, right? Well, the New York Times decided in their infinite wisdom that they were going to go ahead and write an article that says, you're all wrong, everyone out there on the internet, you're all wrong. The word is absolute nonsense. Okay, that's fine. The New York Times is, whatever.
Yeah.
But what was really interesting is that the same day that they released their article, an executive at Google created a design doc to delete this word. They're like, hey, we need to get rid of this word because obviously it's nonsense because the New York Times says that it's nonsense. And I was like, wait a minute, we're talking about fake news and now you're taking this, the New York Times, which has lied us into every single war that we've ever gotten into. You're just gonna take what they're saying as gospel. Verbatim, as gospel. So that's what they did. They put in this design document to delete the word and that's precisely what they did. And the team that was tasked with the censorship actually had a really interesting name. And that interesting name was the Derrida team.
The Derrida team.
Now, do you know a guy by the name of Jacques Derrida?
No.
He's the father of postmodernism. And he advocated for the destruction of Western civilization through the manipulation of words and language, right? And so this person, who happened to be the father of postmodernism, the team that does the censorship happened to just have the exact same name as this philosopher. And so I realized at that point, these people know exactly what they're doing. It's not just fumbling around, with good intentions. It's like these people are there to manipulate the language because they've got an agenda that they're trying to push. And I realized at this point that if they're willing to do that to the president of the United States, what's stopping them from doing that to you? What's stopping them from doing that to anyone?
And how dangerous you're taking arguably the leader of the free world and manipulating their language. I mean, that's
in real time.
Somewhat terrifying.
Somewhat terrifying. So that's the point that I realized that this was crossing over from just like, oh, they've got a different political viewpoint to, no, this is sedition. And if this is sedition and I don't report it, then I am involved now with a conspiracy to commit sedition against a sitting president of the United States. Now, what option?
You're right. I mean, if you think about it, it's sort of like that joke. I think maybe Saturday Night Live did it, where the translator hears from, the president, turns to the Russian and says something completely different.
Yeah.
And that's essentially what you're doing. You're taking this communication tool between people and you're changing what it's saying as it's going to the other person. I mean, the more I think about it, it's so dangerous.
At that moment, I was just like, okay, I've got to do something about this. And so I started looking for a journalist outlet that could publish these documents to the people. I realized that I couldn't just sit idly by. I had to make a push. I had to push this out to not only law enforcement and hope that they would do it. I also had to push out to the people so that people would keep attention and make sure that this would move forward. And also, when I knew that, if I was going to come out, I have to have the eyes on me. Because if I don't have the eyes on me, well, whistleblowers don't have a very long life expectancy.
No one knows who you are, you disappear pretty quickly.
That's right.
Right.
So I knew that the Washington Post was out. I knew the New York Times was out. They're not credible, and they're going to sell me out. Like, that was my interpretation of how everything was going on, what their narratives were. That seemed like they were aligned. They're not going to backstab Google, who's like hosting all their content, and do this negative piece. So I reached out to some people in Poland, because I figured I had to get out of the United States to try to figure out, and I even considered maybe I should have this released in Poland and Hungary first and then have it come back to the United States. But they said, have you talked to anyone at Breitbart? And I said, no. So they said, let me put you in contact. Turns out that the person that was working at Breitbart also sat on the board of Project Veritas. And so they said, hey, let's get this content out to Project Veritas. They can do a whole entire investigation on this. This is what they're set up to do. And so I contacted them, or they contacted me, and then after a quick phone conversation, I had a one-on-one, and here's all the data. And I just gave them all of it. And I said, please don't release this to the public. There may be some metadata that gets scrapped back, but you guys need to understand what's going on so that you guys can, get
How to tell the story.
How to tell the story.
Right.
So that's what I did. And he got that. And then the story went cold. For like a year, the story went nowhere. And I'm sitting in there going, when's this going to break? When am I going to get the call? Like, what's going on? And nothing.
Are you still working at Google all this time?
Yeah, I was still working at Google. But now I'm getting worse and worse and worse. The censorship's getting worse.
You're not looking over your shoulder. I mean, if you think, are you?
Oh, I am. Not only am I looking at my shoulder, but there was a mass shooting at my building when I was working at YouTube. Like 1:45, the fire alarm rang, and I came out. Turns out a mass shooter had shot a bunch of people and then turned the gun on herself. And so, I started to get real nervous, and I was like, why is all this weird stuff happening? And it felt like a movie, right? I wanted to leave Google because nothing was happening, and I've got this crisis of consciousness. And one of the people in the intellectual dark web, who I won't name, but he was kind of consulting me, and he said, "Look, Zach, we don't have anyone else like you inside of Google. You're in the belly of the beast. Don't leave. It's not going to make the political situation any better if you leave.
Right.
Grin and bear it and stick it out, and because we need to monitor this situation."
Right.
So I stuck it out, right? And I stuck it out all the way up until May of 2019. A huge censorship wave came over, and a lot of it was YouTube, a lot of it was like the YouTube content creators, but then a lot of it started to be like this like vaccine stuff, and they were censoring moms who had like all these kids that were vaccine injured, and they were like getting prominent like social media followings, and like canceling their Facebook groups, like canceling their Twitter accounts, like canceling their YouTube pages. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, why are we doing this? Why is Google? And I realized I can't take this anymore. I have to get out for my own sanity. I can no longer exist and function in this company. And it's getting obvious because it's like I'm getting scared just to be in this company, because I know every single day that I've got this secret, that I've leaked a bunch of their internal communications to the outside world, and that maybe, just maybe, this information is going to get out someday. And then, or maybe they're going to figure out that I accessed all these documents and then like drag me into HR. In June, I said, I've had it. I walked into my manager's office and I said, I can't deal with this censorship anymore. Our motto of the company is still organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. And how can we do that if we're censoring the internet? We're not making it universally accessible. We're making it selectively accessible if it follows the agenda of the corporate culture. And so I said, I'm out. I'm out. I'm gonna resign next week with an official letter, and then and 2 weeks later I'll be out. In something that has to be divine intervention, as I'm sitting in my house writing my resignation letter, I get a call. It's James O'Keefe. And he's like, we just did a sting operation, and we'd like you to tell us what your thoughts of this transcript are. It was Jen Janai. They caught her on camera after a few drinks, and she just casually mentions about how Google is going to stop the next Trump situation in 2020. And I went, you did it! Oh my God, you guys did it! You guys actually went out there, and they actually ended up doing the sting operation, and they were able to catch 3 different people talking about machine learning fairness, and they got Jen Janai, one of their AI executives, talking about how only something the size of Google could stop the next Trump situation. So I gave them my analysis. They said, that's great. Do you want to fly down to New York tomorrow and talk about this undercover on camera? And I went, yeah. How did you guys know that I was writing my resignation letter? They're like, what? And so I went, okay, divine intervention. I finished off my resignation letter. It was the first and best resignation letter that I'll ever write. Okay?
Yeah.
And I was so happy because finally it seemed like everything was coming into on alignment, right? I was leaving this company that had subverted American democracy and the free flow of information, and at the same time I was going to out them to the American public so that the American public could stop them. Complete 180 of what I was doing.
Yeah.
Google started to figure out who the anonymous person was, right? I believe that they went through my network logs and figured out which documents that I had access to, and through that first disclosure with Project Veritas, we only released 2 documents, or 2 pages from 2 documents, right? So it wasn't a lot of things.
How many documents had you handed them all?
950 pages.
So 950 pages they have. You got
2 pages,
2 pages.
of that 950. Okay. So, Google was able to figure out who it was, and then they sent a law firm after me, threatening that litigation was coming and making a series of demands, look through your computer and all your backups. And and then allow us to do the same thing and report on who you would talk to and about Google and what documents have you retained.
I have to imagine you must have signed a non-disclosure agreement of some kind.
Yeah, but non-disclosures don't cover illegal activity, which is what this was. I talked to some lawyers, some famous ones, and they're like, oh, you're screwed. Like, they're coming after you, and they're going to come after you, and they're engaging in legal warfare, and they're going to destroy your finances like they've done other Google whistleblowers. And so I went, okay, well, okay, I'm going to get destroyed now. This is what my reward is for warning the public. So I was thinking about this, and I said, they are going to do this so that they can prevent the disclosure of the full 950 pages to the American public. They want to shut me down. They want to lock me down. So I can't win in a court of law. I just don't have the resources.
Yeah.
But I know that I can win in the court of public opinion.
Right.
So what I decide to do is you know what? I'm going to take all the documents. I printed them out. I put them in a box, and I sent it to the Department of Justice Antitrust Division. I then write back to the legal law firm, yeah, I've had your documents. I sent them off to the DOJ. Have fun. Okay? And so I waited, and I waited, and I waited, and then what happened is that they sent their online trolls after me. And what they started to do is they started to dead name me, which is they removed my anonymity by saying, "Oh, Zach Vorhies, you're the big leaker," and exclamation point, exclamation point. And it was with an anonymous troll. It wasn't like someone with their name attached to it.
Yeah.
So they start dead naming me, and someone that was associated with me, when I told them about it, they're like, "Don't do anything. Just stop. Let me interact with this troll." They set up a honeypot. They put a link out. The person clicks the link. We capture the IP address of the individual. We reverse geocode it back to the location. It's Google. So here's someone inside of Google, or at least a Google IP address, that is harassing me, dead naming me, trying to engage in intimidation tactics. And we just caught them. So I said, okay, well, I'm under their target. They're coming after me. They're going to do it either legal or through online trolls. And what's going to happen next is going to be bad. So I decide that at this point that I need to let them know that if anything bad happens to me, we're going to release everything immediately. So I call up James O'Keefe and I say, James, in the event of my untimely demise, you can release all the documents to the public. Full disclosure. I then get off the phone and I go to Twitter and I post the same dead man switch. And I say, in the event of my untimely death, full public disclosure. And I have this like graphic of this guy who's like ensnared in like a dragon's tail, and the dragon's like about to do the last move, and he just stabs it in the heart with a knife. And so, I want to let them know that, hey, you're the dragon, I'm the guy, and if you get me, I'm going to do this finishing blow, which is to let everyone know. Mm-hmm. Well, son of a gun, they sent police to my house. Google called in a wellness check. Now, I don't know if you know what a wellness check is.
No, please enlighten me.
So a wellness check is when they're like, hey, I'm worried about Dell. He seems really unstable. So let's bring some police and we're gonna ask you a few questions. And if you don't answer them right, then we're gonna drag you in, and then you're gonna get a psychological evaluation and blah, 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 blah. Well, Google donates a lot of money to various organizations around the state, and San Francisco is one of them, and the police are kind of they're not going to bite the hand that feeds them, right? So they came to get me and to do this wellness check. But unfortunately for them, I'd given a false address to Google when I left. So they went to the wrong house. They went to my best friend's house. They were really trying to get me. They didn't believe that I wasn't there at the house. And so I got a heads up. And my friend was like, yo, Zach, the police really wanted to get you. They want to get their hands on you. And so I said, okay, well, I hope they don't show up at my house next. I hang up the phone. 30 minutes later, they're ringing the doorbell. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to answer that, because I don't have to talk to the police, because you don't have to talk to the police.
Right.
So I'm like, I'm just going to wait it out because as far as they know, I'm somewhere else, or I'm with family, or I'm at a job because it's at 2 p.m. in the afternoon.
Yeah.
Well, they go from ringing the doorbell to letting themselves in and then like banging on the inner door to my house. And I'm like, okay, and I don't answer. Well, they decide that something next to the gate might be a bomb. It's a bomb, I don't know, let's make sure by calling in a bomb squad. So, just to make sure. So they called in a bomb threat. Why? Because I had a tin can of denatured alcohol sitting by my gate, which is what my roommate uses when she spins fire at the festivals around California. So they called that in, and technically it's an incendiary, substance, but it's safe. But they called in a bomb threat, and they brought in the bomb robots, and they shut down from 20th and Valencia to 22nd and Valencia. The liquor store across my house was evacuated. The theater down the street was evacuated. My neighbors were evacuated.
Are you still just sitting inside?
I don't know that this is going on because I'm like laying low. Like I'm like creeping around the house, under the windows, And so
I'd be freaking out. I mean, people think, they're always like, God, Del, you're so brave. But there's certain things that I would just be like, I'd be freaking out.
Well, it was kind of freaky because I had this phone, right? And there's like this curtain. And so like I kind of periscope with my phone. I take my phone, I poke it out, and then I can see that there's a cop car parked across the street. I'm like, oh shit, there's a cop car. Can't, so I lay low and I crawl up into the bed and I just start playing video games. And I'm playing video games and I'm trying to calm my nerves because I'm kind of like shaking now. And that's when I hear the helicopter start circling very closely over the rooftops. And I went, what are the chances that this is for me, right? But now I hear 2 helicopters. There's 2 helicopters circling around. I'm like, no, there must have been a murder coincidentally that happened by my house. And now they're chasing after that. Now I just think that it's for me. And at that point, I get a call from my friend. And he's like, hey, man, I was worried about you. I came to like check in on you. And your whole street's been blocked off and there's cops everywhere. And I went, no way. And he's like, yeah, everything's blocked off. They're waiting for you to come out. And so I ended up negotiating with the police officer over the phone. I ended up coming out with my hands up at gunpoint. And there's video of me like with my hands up, taking direction from the loudspeaker, turning around, showing they don't have any weapons. And the reason why that happened was because they were letting me know that under no uncertain conditions they were going to leave. Yeah. So I went, well, if something's going to happen, then it's better for me to just come out where everyone's taking video and making sure that if anything funny happens, then everyone is able to see it. So I come out, I do that whole thing. They detain me. They ask me their questions, such as, if I was feeling suicidal, if I wanted to harm myself or anyone else. And then they asked me at the end of these 6 questions, why would Google do this? And I went, aha, I knew it was Google that called in this wellness check. So that was the first clue that I got that they had been the ones that instrumented this. I mean, obviously it's obvious, but you want concrete proof.
Right.
And so I said, yeah, I know why they're doing this because I blew the whistle and I gave all of their documents and I leaked it to the DOJ. And the police were like, do you have proof of this? And I said, yep. And I took out my phone and I showed him the picture of the letter that I had taken him. And then they're like, oh my gosh, you're a whistleblower. And I went, yep, I'm a whistleblower. This is why you guys are all here. They're wasting your time. And so after that, they de-escalated. They became really friendly. They left. They were like, okay, we understand what's going on. They shut down the whole the operation they had done where they closed down the street. They opened it back up. And then the next day I was out. I was out of San Francisco on a plane going to Washington, D.C. And I hid out. And then I went to New York and I was like, there's no reason to be anonymous anymore. I'm just going to go in front of the camera. And that's what we did. And I came out and I said, yes, I'm revealing myself for the first time. And I'm disclosing all 950 pages to the general public now. And you can all see why Google would want to call this wellness check on me, put my life in danger, and harass me with their legal system. And I was like, if Google's going to sue me, then let them sue me in the context of me knowingly providing all this documentation to everyone, and then I'll fight them in the court of public opinion.
Right.
So that's what it did. It was a huge success. That's kind of like where I am today now, is that, like, you know, it's been kind of the fallout of that event.
They dropped the lawsuits.
They haven't dropped it, more like they haven't really followed up with it.
Right.
The last letter I got was, hey, can you really, like, search your computer? And I wrote back, I was like, hey, if I find anything else, gotta let you know that I'm obliged to give them to the DOJ. Let me know if you want me to conduct that search. They never got back to me.
Got it.
So that was the last I heard from Google.
Did you get the response did it make world change? Did it change as much as you had hoped it would?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
Oh, yeah. So there are now investigations at 3 levels of government. You got the federal government and the DOJ investigation for monopolistic practices. They're now sending letters out, which I'm getting kind of copies of from certain individuals. Great. So boom, federal government. You also have 51 state attorney generals that are doing an antitrust probe of big tech.
Wow.
Okay. The only one that's not doing that is California. So we can figure out why that is. And then the city of New York and then another city that I can't remember right now are also launching their investigations. So we've got city, state, and federal government all launching probes. And what Attorney General William Barr said, which was really interesting, is that, you know, there's surprisingly a lot of bipartisan support to investigate Google and the big tech companies. And so I'm like, I know that every single one of them, or at least most of them, is likely reading the disclosure that I've made public. Because it's like, once you see the whole system of manipulation and censorship, it's undeniable that they know exactly what they're doing and that they're trying to use this so that they can, you know, exert their political and cultural values upon the United States and upon the world.
What can people do? Watching this show, I'm sure people right now are out there, they're shaking their seats. I knew it. In some ways, it could feel helpless. What does someone do with this information right now? What would you like people to do?
Well, so what I'd like them to do is I'd like them to spread this information. Because right now we're going through an amount of massive change within the United States. And ultimately, this is a war for people's minds, what they believe, the things that they value, what they know to be true. Now, for a lot of these people, they want to have concrete evidence that Google is manipulating. For those people, I say, check out my disclosure. You can either go to Project Veritas, or you can go to my new website, which is zachvorhies.com. And you can go and you can download the entire disclosure for yourself. And you can see what Google was up to. And I've given my analysis, and I've given, like, you know, images and articles that I've written myself that show how Google is doing their manipulation. Another thing that they can do is that they can follow me on Twitter. And, you know, I'm here fighting a big dragon, and they can join me in calling these people out. Because if we can't have the freedom of ideas, we can't have the freedom of the marketplace. And third, they can start a Google detox. And the way that the Google detox works is that you've got to stop using all of these services that Google has. They're tracking us, Del. They're tracking us through our Chrome browser, through our Gmail, through our Android phones. And what a bunch of us are telling Google is that, hey, if you're going to censor us, then we're going to censor you. And the way that we're going to censor Google is that we're going to stop using their Google search engine. I recommend DuckDuckGo. Bing is another great one. It doesn't really matter as long as it's not Google.
Right.
Okay? Don't use Gmail. Use ProtonMail, one of these other mail services.
Yeah.
I like ProtonMail because it encrypts from end to end. Don't use Android phone. Use iPhone or BlackBerry. And don't use the Chrome browser. Use the Brave browser. And I like the Brave browser. In fact, it's better than Chrome. It's actually based off the open source version of Chrome, but then the person that founded the company removed all of the different tracking mechanisms that Google and the big tech corporations use to track all of us. And if those actions are blocked, then that means they're not executing, which means that they take up less memory and your computer runs faster. Those are the three things that I have to tell people to sort of fight back.
Fantastic, man. So I'm curious, you're a Google whistleblower. You've exposed Google based on politics and Donald Trump. What does a Google whistleblower think about vaccines?
The thing is that I didn't believe in vaccine harm until I saw Google and Facebook and Twitter and all of these globalist organizations all say that it was safe. Once I started seeing them go out and censor in order to enforce their message, then that's when I realized that this was something that I needed to investigate. And once I started to investigate that, I realized, whoa, there's a really big problem. And vaccines is just yet another part, along with the food, along with the bees, it's just yet another thing that the establishment is trying to cover up. And they're all linked. And it's funny is that once you realize that they're manipulating, the search results, you start seeing how they're manipulating all these different vectors of our consumption and all the things that we take in. And so for me, it's like I radically changed the food that I ate. I radically changed the water that I drink. If anybody actually understands the true science, they become immediately anti-vax. They'll never vaccine.
You'll never go back.
Yeah, you'll never go back.
Are there algorithms that you know of at Google that are tracking vaccines with words and things like that and censoring, or is it just something you're assuming based on how you know they dealt with Donald Trump?
They actually have a term for it. It's called nutritional labels for websites. So what they want to do is that they are going to display on the Chrome browser, oh, this is fake news. And they're already starting to do that. You see the pop-ups coming up for YouTube now. Whenever you type in vaccines, they oh, here's the thing. Well, that was planned back in 2017. It's now being unleashed into the public. They want to push the envelope, so it's going to get worse and worse and worse as we go along.
It's inspiring to hear people that step forward. I think at a time, I think that, I think you're right. Right now, 2020, this year, what's going on, so much is being revealed. So many more people are stepping forward. And I just want to thank you for coming on and I think giving us all courage. You're still here. You took on arguably one of the biggest, most dangerous bullies in the world. And, keep up the good work. Keep us posted. We'll definitely have you back. And if there's anything that shifts or anything that moves, definitely let us know so we can.
Keep up the heat, man.
We will.
Keep it up because the thing is that something is changing in the United States and it's changing fast. And the powers that be are banding together with their vaccines and their censorship. And I had a post about global warming that Facebook removed, and their position about all of that, the establishment position has become so circus-like that they are now reverting to removing our memes off of our Facebook page. And so the only reason why they're doing that is because they are losing and we are winning. And so the people that see the truth, we have to just keep on pushing because, we're going to push through. And if we don't, I don't really want to live in that kind of world where the people that are saying that vaccines are safe and pump your baby with 72 run the world. That's a open air prison. And I've seen what that does because I've got a lot of friends from Russia who survived the Soviet Union. And, our backs are against the wall. We
got nothing to lose.
We got nothing to lose. Right? So I really appreciate what you're doing, Del. It's amazing and inspiring to see everything that you're doing.
It's going to take all of us, isn't it? Thank you, brother.
Thank you.
Keep up the good work.
You
All right.
too.